let's be real here, people. The current situation going on in the world at the moment is going to result in a massive, catastrophic global economic recession. That's where we're going with this. And if you want to hear me talk more about that and more in depth, you can check me out on Patreon. But as a result of this massive, catastrophic global recession, which is coming, which will affect some countries more than others, Eddie Hearn knows, and I'm sure many other promoters know, that as soon as boxing resumes, they have to try and cash in and put the biggest fights on possible now before the economic collapse becomes complete. Because that's what we're talking about here, an economic collapse. So Eddie Hearn has said in this interview here, and I think in a couple of other interviews, that he's looking to put the biggest fights on ASAP. And I did talk last year and maybe the year before too about how this current resurgence in boxing, and particularly the heavyweight division, is not going to last for long, and there will be a slump. And I was talking about how the sport of boxing was in limbo in terms of being in the Olympics, because there was long talk of boxing not being in the Olympics for the next one, which was supposed to be this year. That's now been pushed back to next year. And I said that that could affect professional boxing. So enjoy this current heavyweight era for what it is right now, because it won't last forever and boxing will go down into a slump again. Oh, yes, it will. And this is why I always shake my head at all these miserable naysayers who always want to moan and complain about everything in boxing. Oh, it's not as good as it used to be. Oh, this heavyweight division's terrible. It's nowhere near as good as the 90s or the 70s, and these guys are all rubbish. I ain't got no time for people like that. Because when this era is over, that's when you'll really appreciate it. Because I was around in the 90s and the 80s, and I remember back then, there were staunch critics of the heavyweight division, even though it was a great era in the 90s in particular. There were legion, the amount of critics of the heavyweight division were legion, both in the general public and in the boxing media, constantly running the division down. But you look back in retrospect and think, actually, it was a really great era with really great fighters. Same thing now. So as much as I thought that there would be a slump in heavyweight boxing and in boxing in general, I didn't think it would come this quick. I certainly didn't foresee this situation that's going on in the world at the moment, which we're all being impacted by. I didn't foresee something like this happening so soon. And, it is what it is. It's happened. This is going to have an impact on boxing, just as it's having an impact on many other businesses, etc. So Eddie Hearn is saying that we could see, once boxing resumes, Fury Joshua later on this year. Obviously, Deontay Wilder would have to take a step-aside deal. And I personally think that Wilder should take a step-aside deal now more than he ever has. Look, Deontay Wilder has taken terrible advice in his career over the past couple years. He should have taken the opportunity to fight Dillian Whyte. He should have taken the opportunity to fight Anthony Joshua, particularly the DAZN deal. That was crazy to turn that down. He should have taken so many opportunities, Deontay Wilder. This right now is the opportunity to make right all the previous bad decisions and agree a step-aside deal where he faces the winner of AJ Fury. That's what he needs to do. That would be the most prudent thing to do, because that means that his next fight is undisputed. Yeah. And let's say Anthony Joshua goes in there and causes an upset, because that's what it would be. If he goes in there and causes an upset against Tyson Fury, I personally think from a stylistic point of view, Wilder has a better chance against AJ than he has against Fury. Boxing is chess, it ain't checkers. It's rock, paper, scissors. I think Fury is just a very, very difficult matchup for Deontay Wilder, whereas AJ, if he gets past Fury, upsets the apple cart, that might be the way to go. And they would have to structure the deal. This is one thing I will say for Deontay. They'd have to structure the deal of the undisputed fight between Fury and AJ in such a way that if there is a rematch clause, it's not an immediate rematch. It's a rematch after the Deontay Wilder challenge. That's the way they would have to structure it. Now, obviously, that brings Dillian Whyte in, and Dillian Whyte needs his mandatory shot, and it might be complicated, okay? But I just feel like we don't know if a situation like is going on in the world at the moment with this current, disaster. We don't know if another situation like that is going to happen just around the corner later on this year, next year. So now is the time to strike while the iron is hot. Now is that time. So as I say, Deontay Wilder has got the opportunity now to make his next fight the undisputed fight. Rather than having to go through Fury, don't go through Fury to get the undisputed. Have the undisputed in your next fight guaranteed. Try and get that deal done. That's what I would say to Wilder. And for Fury and Joshua, they've both made their money. They're both fantastically rich. They're both done very, very well. So if boxing was to disappear, God forbid, or to just completely go down the toilet, then, they can still sail off into the sunset and be relatively okay. But for history, there should be more pressure that they put on themselves at this point to make this fight sooner rather than later, given the current global situation. So hopefully Eddie Hearn is true to his word, and I think he will be, because he understands that boxing is in jeopardy now. There are lots of different businesses and lots of different sports, etc., which are in jeopardy at this point. The world is changing rapidly and not for the better. So if there were certain fighters who weren't striking while the iron was hot before, well, they better damn sure do it now, because they may never see the opportunity again. I think all of us should be abundantly aware of that now. So let's see what happens here, people. I'd like to see the Joshua Fury fight be the next one that either Joshua or Fury have. Maybe they can get a deal for Kubrat Pulev to step aside again, because we're in exceptional circumstances at the moment. So maybe they can get Pulev to step aside, get Fury to step aside, get Wilder to step aside, and then get AJ Fury on, Now, obviously it would be a mess after that because you'd have Alexander Usyk calling for his shot. You'd have Dillian Whyte calling for his shot. You'd have Deontay Wilder, obviously. But undisputed very rarely lasts very long. When Lennox Lewis became undisputed champion when he beat Holyfield in a rematch, he was only undisputed for a matter of months before he started getting stripped of belts. He got stripped of, I think, was it the WBA first? Because he was supposed to fight John Ruiz. And he went and fought Michael Grant instead. So his undisputed status didn't last very long. But while he continued to be champion, he was still regarded as the man. So nobody really thought that John Ruiz was somebody with a legitimate claim to the throne, because he hadn't been undisputed. And, Lewis hadn't gone away or anything or retired, nothing like that. He was undisputed. He got stripped of a belt, but he continued to fight and he continued to beat top fighters. So people still looked at Lewis as though he was undisputed, even though technically he didn't have all the belts. So you could see a situation where the winner of Joshua Fury, they might get stripped of belts. Dillian Whyte could fight for a vacant belt. Wilder could fight for a vacant belt. Usyk, etc. That could happen, but they would still retain the status as the consensus champion in the division, the winner of Joshua Fury. And that's the most important thing. It's not that you have to become undisputed and keep the undisputed title ongoing for years. No, that's not necessary. back in the days, you used to have that, of course. Mike Tyson was undisputed champion. Back then, there was only 3 belts, so it was a little bit easier. Mike Tyson was undisputed champion for quite a while. But in recent times, when you've had undisputed champions like Alexander Usyk, obviously he moved up and the belts are now fragmented. At cruiserweight, also you had Terence Crawford. He was undisputed for a very brief amount of time, 140 pounds before the belts were fragmented and he moved up. So yeah, that's my take on it. I think that undisputed ASAP and allow Wilder to take a crack at the winner, who will be the consensus champion, whether he's undisputed or not. He'll be consensus champion, which is as good as undisputed in this particular situation. Yeah, because you'll be the winner of the undisputed fight then fights Wilder straight after. Even if they don't have all the belts, we know that that's the fight. Yeah, we know that that's because it's happening immediately. There's no big time elapse between the 2 fights. It's happening immediately. So anyway, those are just my musings on the current situation. Hopefully boxing will resume sooner rather than later. I know that the Anthony Joshua fight has now been cancelled or pushed back, and that was supposed to happen in, was it June? So I don't know, will it resume in September, October? Because of the way things are playing out, I just think it's so important that we move straight into the undisputed fight, because we don't know what's going to happen in this world around the corner at the moment, people. So let's get it on now. Let's, let's strike while the iron is hot and not let this opportunity pass us by. Hopefully, Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, Eddie Hearn, Bob Arum, Frank Warren all have the same mindset in trying to do that. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. It's happening. I'm out. Join me on Patreon. I upload a minimum of 2 podcasts every single week, covering a wide variety of controversial topics, as well as live stream Q&A sessions. Take a look on screen right now at some of the podcasts I've produced so far. For just $3 a month, the equivalent of about £2 a month, you get access to all my new podcasts and my entire back catalogue of past podcasts, including my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. You can listen on your computer or on your smartphone or tablet by downloading the Patreon app from the Google Play Store or the App Store for free. The Patreon app also allows you to download each podcast in MP3. For less than the price of a cup of coffee, you get access to dozens of hours of exclusive content. It's easy to sign up, there's no contract, and you can cancel at any time. So come and join our community of free and critical thinkers by signing up with me here on Patreon today.